Today is Thursday, November 20th, 2025, a day when every federal courthouse in America should be silent. No hearings, no judges, no reporters, just locked doors and empty marble hallways waiting for Monday. But not today, not in Manhattan, not inside the Southern District of New York, because this morning something so serious, so explosive, so deeply out of control has happened that SDNY has been forced to break protocol, unlock its doors on a weekend, and prepare for a hearing that could end Shawn Diddy life forever. The air outside the courthouse is freezing, the kind that bites through coats and gloves, but reporters don't care. They're packed shoulder to shoulder on the steps, cameras flashing like lightning, microphones raised like weapons, all whispering the same thing under their breath. He did it again. He broke the rules. He might get life. They don't know the details yet. They just know this: a federal judge does not call an emergency sentencing review on a Saturday unless the situation is catastrophic. And everything traces back to a single moment inside Fort Dix Federal Prison, a moment that should have been nothing: a random bed check, a silent hallway, a guard lifting a pillow, but instead turned into the spark that set off a national explosion. Before we go any deeper into this, tell me in the comments right now, do you think one mistake in prison should be enough to erase a man's freedom forever? And while you're here, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss breaking updates like this. Now, let's get back to the story, because this isn't just a scandal. This isn't just another violation. This is the moment everything Diddy thought he had left snapped in half. It began 9 days earlier. November 13th, 2025, 2:17 a.m. Fort Dix was quiet, the kind of silence only a federal prison can hold: thick, heavy, motionless. A correctional officer doing a routine check stepped into Diddy's cell. No yelling, no alarm, just the soft beam of a flashlight sweeping across the bed, the wall, the floor, and then stopping. The officer froze. Under Diddy's thin pillow, pressed flat like it had been hidden with care, was a small silver-capped bottle. Cold, hard, illegal. A bottle no inmate could ever possess. A bottle that, if real, could unravel everything, and the guard knew it instantly. His breath caught in his throat. His hand trembled just enough to betray the weight of the moment. Because alcohol in prison is not a small infraction. It's not a slap-on-the-wrist violation. It is a detonator. The officer didn't shout. He didn't curse. He didn't even look angry. He just stared at the bottle, frozen in shock, because he knew exactly what he was holding. Not contraband, not a drink. He was holding a man's future in his hands, a future that was about to collapse. The moment the bottle was lifted, everything shifted. Not just in Diddy's cell, not just in the unit. The entire rhythm of Fort Dix changed overnight. Officers swarmed the corridor, their radios spitting static as supervisors rushed in, eyes wide, voices tight. They sealed the bottle in an evidence bag within minutes. Photos were snapped, surveillance footage pulled, movement logs printed, statements collected, and by sunrise, the report was already on its way to SDNY. Not to an assistant, not to a clerk, but straight to the one man who had the authority to erase Diddy's sentence completely. Judge Subramanian. The same judge who sentenced him on October 3rd. The same judge who warned him, directly and clearly, any violation will trigger a full sentencing review. And now that violation was sitting on the judge's desk. A silver-capped bottle that looked small, but carried the weight of a life sentence. Inside the prison, whispers spread through the cell blocks, like flames through dry grass. Bro, they found alcohol under his pillow. It's over. He had 50 months. He's done. Even the officers felt the pressure. They didn't say it out loud, but it showed in the way they walked faster, exchanged nervous glances, double-checked their logs. Because this wasn't just any inmate. This wasn't random contraband. This was a federal disaster. Because when misconduct involves a national figure, especially one already convicted on serious federal charges, every decision becomes magnified. Every mistake becomes a headline. Every piece of evidence becomes a turning point. By mid-morning on November 13th, Diddy had been removed from his unit and placed in a temporary isolation room, not as punishment, but as protocol for a high-level violation that could change his sentence. He sat alone, cuffed, elbows on knees, staring at the cold floor. The fluorescent light flickered faintly above him, casting shadows that made the room feel even smaller. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He didn't even ask for a lawyer. He just breathed slow, shaky breaths that echoed off the concrete walls. Because he knew what came next. He replayed everything in his mind. The 29-day trial, the July 2nd verdict, Cassie's testimony, the cameras outside the courthouse, his mother crying on sentencing day. The 50-month punishment a miracle compared to what prosecutors asked for. And now all of it might be gone. Not because of a violent act, not because of a new crime, but because of a single bottle hidden beneath a pillow. While Diddy waited in isolation, Fort Dix erupted. The surveillance room turned into a battlefield of speculation. Pause that. Zoom in. Who walked past his bunk at 1:58? Why is this log entry missing? Where did this bottle come from? They replayed the same grainy footage again and again, officers huddled so close, their shoulders touched the screens. A shadow moving near his bunk, a disturbance in the hallway. Something passed, something shifted, something wasn't right. One officer whispered what the entire room was thinking. This is going straight to SDNY, and when SDNY gets involved, the consequences multiply. Because the judge doesn't see a bottle, he sees defiance, he sees a violation of trust, he sees a man who, weeks after sentencing, already broke the rules. By early afternoon, Fort Dix went into partial lockdown. Diddy was placed under transport evaluation. Security surged around him. The warden called the Bureau of Prisons, and the Bureau called SDNY. No one waited for Monday. This was urgent. This was serious. This was a threat to federal authority, and SDNY responded instantly. They ordered an emergency hearing. On a Saturday, a courthouse-closed day, a historic day, a day that should have been peaceful, but instead became the turning point of Diddy's entire life. And as the transport van carrying him approached Manhattan, cameras lined the street, reporters filled the sidewalks, helicopters hovered overhead. And somewhere deep in the courthouse, Judge Subramanian prepared to decide whether a single mistake deserved the harshest punishment the federal system allows. The transport van rolled down into the underground bay of the Manhattan Federal Courthouse, the cold metal echoing as the heavy doors clanged shut behind it. The reporters outside couldn't see him, but they didn't need to. Everyone already knew who was inside. Everyone already knew why the courthouse, normally silent on a Saturday, was wide awake, flooded with staff, security, and media. Shawn Diddy Combs was moments away from stepping into the courtroom that could erase his 50-month sentence and replace it with something far darker. Inside the van, everything was shaking. Not the vehicle, Diddy. His wrists trembled in the cuffs. The cold steel pressed against his skin so tightly it felt like ice was burning his bones. He stared straight ahead, not at the floor, not at the walls, not at the marshals sitting across from him. He stared at nothing, because he knew that whatever waited for him upstairs wasn't a hearing, it was a reckoning. The engine shut off. Silence swallowed the space. And in that silence, Diddy could hear the muffled roar from outside, reporters shouting, cameras firing, the distant hum of helicopters circling overhead. His breath shook in his chest. One marshal leaned forward. Combs, when the door opens, stand and follow instructions. No sudden moves. Diddy didn't respond. He didn't nod. He simply blinked slowly, as if his eyelids were too heavy to lift fully. The marshal's words faded into the background as the van doors swung open and the fluorescent basement lights poured inside. The hallway was lined with marshals. More than usual, more than Diddy had ever seen. They weren't here to protect him. They were here because this wasn't normal. Because someone caught with contraband in a federal facility, someone with a high-profile case, someone with a volatile public image posed a risk even without trying. He stepped down slowly. The chains around his ankles scraped the concrete, leaving a metallic echo that traveled down the hall. Officers watched him with the same expression, caution, responsibility, and something else. Something like disbelief, because this didn't happen. Not to celebrities, not to billionaires, not to people who had once ruled the entertainment world. He was being escorted like a man whose life was already over. The hallway stretched out like a tunnel leading him into darkness. Each step felt heavier. Each breath came harder. Each second ticked toward the moment he would face a judge, whose patience he had already tested once. The elevator ride was suffocating. The small metal box reflected a faint image of Diddy's face, hollow eyes, cracked lips, fear carved into every line. He didn't look like the man who strutted across stages. He looked like someone being pulled into the final chapter of his own downfall, a chapter he didn't know how to rewrite, a chapter he couldn't escape. When the elevator doors slid open, chaos hit immediately. Clerks rushed across the hall with stacks of documents. Prosecutors whispered sharply to each other near the courtroom entrance. Security tightened the perimeter. Reporters pressed their faces against the one-corridor window, desperate to catch even a shadow of him. Standing near the doors to courtroom 12B was Mark Agnifilo, his attorney. His tie was crooked, his hair disheveled, his eyes red and glassy from hours of panic and no sleep. The moment he saw Diddy, he rushed forward. "Shawn, listen to me," Mark whispered harshly. "Do not react. No matter what happens in there. Do not cry out. Do not yell. Do not move unless I tell you." The judge is already at the edge. One wrong move, Diddy cut him off in a breath that barely formed words. "Mark, he's not gonna... He won't..." Mark looked at him like a man holding on to the last piece of a sinking ship. "I'm here. I'm going to do everything I can. But you need to keep it together. Do you understand me?" His voice cracked. "Shawn, please." But Diddy didn't answer. His throat tightened until he couldn't speak at all. The marshal tapped Mark's shoulder. "We're moving." The courtroom doors opened, and the world went silent. Not a whisper, not a breath, not a single sound from a room filled with more people than seats. Every reporter who covered Diddy's trial was here. Every legal analyst who had debated his sentencing was here. Every sketch artist who documented the trial's lowest moments was back in their spot. The moment Diddy stepped inside, every head turned. His shackles clinked, his feet dragged, his face pale, stunned. Trembling looked like someone walking toward the end of his own story. Prosecutors sat ready. Their table was stacked with evidence movement logs, photographs of the bottle, printed inmate statements, surveillance screenshots. They weren't here to argue. They were here to end the discussion entirely. One prosecutor leaned toward another. She whispered, "He's done." The other whispered back, "He did this to himself." Mark heard it. Diddy didn't need to. He could feel it. They reached the defense table. Mark gently pulled the chair out, guiding him to sit. Diddy lowered himself slowly, hands shaking, eyes locked on the bench in front of him. The chains around his wrists clattered softly as he exhaled a scared, hollow breath. For a moment, the room remained still, and then the back door behind the judge's bench opened. Every person in courtroom 12B stood up automatically. Even Diddy, though his legs barely held him. Judge Aaron Subramanian entered. He didn't walk in like a man beginning a hearing. He walked in like a man who had already made a decision. His robe swayed behind him. His expression was carved in stone cold, stern, disappointed. Not angry, something worse, something final. And the moment he sat, the courtroom followed. He picked up the violation report, thick pages bound by a black clip. He didn't flip through it quickly. He turned the pages slowly, deliberately, the sound of each sheet scraping softly echoing across the room. Then he looked at Diddy, not with hatred, not with emotion, but with the kind of stare that makes time itself feel heavy. "Mr. Combs," the judge began, voice deep and controlled, "this is an emergency sentencing review held on a non-business day. That alone should tell you how serious this matter is." Diddy swallowed. Hard. His breath trembled as if each inhale cut him from the inside. The judge continued. "On November 13th at approximately 2:17 a.m., A prohibited alcohol container was discovered concealed beneath your pillow at Fort Dix Federal Correctional Institution. The prosecutor stood immediately, lifting the sealed evidence bag. Inside, the small silver cap bottle shimmered under the lights. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "this was in the defendant's possession. Movement logs show discrepancies. Surveillance footage shows unauthorized activity, and the defendant provided no denial." She placed the bottle onto the evidence table with a soft but devastating thud. Diddy flinched like he'd been struck. Mark stood next. "Your Honor, the investigation is incomplete. The footage is inconclusive. We request more time." The judge raised his hand. Mark froze mid-sentence. "This is a violation review, Mr. Agnifilo," the judge said. "The standard is not beyond reasonable doubt. The standard is simple possession." Mark's voice died in his throat. He sat slowly, defeated. The judge shifted to the next page. "Footage captured movement toward your bunk at 1:58 a.m. Movement logs contradict the recorded staff activity. At the time of discovery, you offered no explanation. You remained silent." Diddy shut his eyes, breath breaking as he lowered his head. The prosecutor spoke again. "Your Honor, this behavior is classified as severe misconduct under federal guidelines. Given the defendant's public profile, ongoing risk factors, and recent sentencing," the judge interrupted. "What are you recommending?" The entire courtroom held its breath. The prosecutor inhaled slowly. "We recommend his previous sentence be vacated and replaced with the maximum penalty available under federal law." A wave of gasps crashed through the room. Diddy's eyes shot open. His mouth parted in shock. He looked at Mark, silently begging, pleading, searching for any sign of hope. Mark rose again, desperate. "Your Honor, this is extreme." "Sit down, Mr. Agnifilo." The judge's voice carried the weight of a gavel without needing one. Mark sank back into his seat. Diddy sat frozen, breath shaking, eyes filling with tears that threatened to fall. The judge looked at him again. "Mr. Combs," he said quietly, "this court must decide whether your actions demonstrate an inability to comply with federal law." The room went silent. The next words would change his life. The air inside courtroom 12B felt like it had thickened, as if every molecule in the room suddenly understood the gravity of what was coming. Diddy sat hunched forward, eyes wide, lips trembling, barely able to breathe. His hands, chained together, rested on the table, shaking uncontrollably. He wasn't just nervous. He wasn't just scared. He was witnessing his future tilt over the edge, inch by inch, with every word the judge spoke. Judge Subramanian didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calmness was the most terrifying part. He lifted another sheet from the violation report, scanned it silently, then set it down with a kind of finality that made Diddy's stomach tighten, like a knot being pulled too hard. "Mr. Combs," the judge said, "this court warned you, directly and clearly, that any violation, no matter how small, would force us to revisit your sentence." Diddy blinked rapidly, a tear slipping down before he could stop it. Mark glanced at him quickly, as if trying to keep him from falling apart. But even Mark knew he had no control here. The judge continued. "You had been sentenced for less than 2 months. You barely began your term. And yet here we are, already reviewing misconduct." He paused, letting the silence hit harder than any accusation. "Inmate alcohol possession is not a simple mistake," the judge said. "It is a breach of federal trust. It is a danger to institutional order. And it is, especially in this courtroom, an act of defiance." Diddy's breath caught in his throat. Defiance. That word alone felt like a blade. He whispered, barely able to form the words. I wasn't trying to defy anything. Please." But the judge spoke over him, quiet, controlled, sharp. "This is not about what you intended. This is about what you did." The room stayed painfully still. Reporters leaned forward as if leaning closer would help them absorb every fragment of this moment. Sketch artists sketched faster. Knowing these expressions, Diddy's panic, the judge's stillness would become images replayed across the world within hours. The prosecutor stepped forward again. Her voice was steady, unshaken. "Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming. The bottle was found directly under the defendant's pillow. Movement logs show unexplained activity near his bunk. Surveillance corroborates unauthorized presence in the area, and the defendant remains silent when questioned. She placed another document on the judge's bench. Inmate statements signed and time-stamped indicate that Mr. Combs had access to the contraband days before discovery. Mark rose instantly. Your Honor, these statements cannot be. The judge lifted one hand. Mark stopped as if the floor had swallowed his voice. Mr. Agnifilo, the judge said calmly, this is a violation review, not a trial. The evidentiary threshold is significantly lower. Your objections are noted. They are not persuasive. Mark sank back into his chair, his face pale, his jaw tight, his eyes screaming with frustration. He couldn't speak aloud. He knew the judge was done listening to excuses. And Diddy knew it too. The judge leaned forward, not aggressively, not angrily, just with a cold, quiet certainty that made everyone's heart rate spike. You were granted leniency, he said. You were given 50 months, a sentence significantly lower than what the government recommended. You were given trust. He paused. And you violated that trust. Diddy's breath shattered. His chest tightened. His hands curled into shaking fists. Your Honor, please, he whispered, tears dripping onto the table. It wasn't supposed to. I didn't want to please. Don't. The judge cut him off again. Enough. The word struck him like a physical force. Diddy jerked back slightly, tears flooding again. The marshal behind him stepped forward subtly, ready if he collapsed. The judge's voice grew colder. You have shown this court that you are not prepared to follow the conditions of your incarceration. You have shown instability, disregard for structure, and a total inability to adhere to federal rules. He looked at the violation report again, then closed it. The sound, just a thin stack of paper pressing shut, echoed through the room like a door slamming. In normal circumstances, Mr. Combs, the judge said, these infractions could result in disciplinary segregation or time additions within Bureau of Prisons guidelines. But your case is not normal. He lifted his gaze, locking eyes with Diddy. You are a federal inmate under active post-sentencing review. Your case remains under heightened scrutiny due to your public profile. Therefore, this violation holds greater consequence than it would for others. Diddy broke again. His entire body shook as he leaned forward, hands covering his face, sobbing quietly but uncontrollably. Mark reached over, trying to whisper reassurance, but even he looked defeated. The judge continued. This court must now determine whether your original sentence remains appropriate. The air snapped. That was the moment everyone knew. The judge wasn't reconsidering the incident. He was reconsidering everything. Diddy lifted his head, soaked in tears, voice cracking like glass. Your Honor, please, please, don't take my sentence away. Please don't. I can fix this, I swear to God. The judge stared at him, emotionless. But then, something unexpected happened. The back door of the courtroom opened quietly. Everyone turned. Cassie walked in. She moved silently, slipping into the far back row. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable, but her eyes looked heavy, as though she was battling emotions she didn't want anyone to see. Diddy saw her and froze. His breath caught. His voice died. His entire body stiffened like someone had hit pause on him. Cassie didn't smile. She didn't glare. She didn't look angry. She looked sad. That was worse. So much worse. Because her sadness felt like the final confirmation that things were about to collapse beyond repair. The judge noticed her entrance but didn't comment. Instead, he turned another page in the report and spoke. Mr. Combs, your behavior since entering federal custody has demonstrated instability, emotional volatility, and a failure to follow basic correctional guidelines. These issues have been documented by staff on multiple occasions. He tapped the page. And this violation confirms to the court that the structure you were given is insufficient. Diddy shook his head rapidly, tears streaming. No, 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 Your Honor, I swear I can follow. I swear, just give me another stop, the judge said. The entire room froze. You were warned, the judge said quietly. You were warned on October 3rd. You acknowledged the warning. And yet, here we are. He lowered his gaze and spoke the sentence that broke Diddy's last thread of hope. This court must decide if you can safely remain under the sentence previously imposed, or if a new, more severe sentence is required. A gasp hit the room like a wave. Even the prosecutors looked shaken. Diddy collapsed forward, crying so hard his shoulders shook violently. "Your Honor, please. I have kids, please. Don't, please. I didn't mean to. I can't do this. I can't." The marshal stepped closer, ready to intervene. Mark whispered urgently, "Shawn, stop. You're hurting your case, please." But Diddy couldn't stop. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. He was drowning. And the judge wasn't done. "Mr. Combs," he said, "this court is now prepared to deliver its determination." The room snapped into complete, suffocating silence. Every person in that courtroom knew the next words would decide the rest of his life. The judge's words didn't just quiet the room, they crushed it. Every whisper died instantly. Every pen froze midair. Even the air itself felt like it stopped moving, hanging heavy and tense, waiting for the blow everyone knew was about to land. Diddy sat there trembling, barely holding himself upright. His chest rose and fell in rapid, broken breaths, his eyes red, swollen, terrified, locked on the judge with a desperation that pierced the entire room. He looked like a man waiting for a verdict he already knew was fatal. Judge Subramanian adjusted his glasses slowly, almost methodically, like each gesture carried the weight of a lifetime. His jaw clenched, his fingers interlocked, his gaze hardened. "This court," he began, "has taken considerable time reviewing the violation report, the supporting evidence, the inmate statements, the movement logs, and the surveillance footage." He laid a hand on the stack of documents beside him. "These findings are not ambiguous, they are not unclear, and they are not minor." Diddy flinched at the word minor, because that was exactly what he had been praying. This entire situation would be a mistake, a misunderstanding, a misfiled report, something small. But the judge's tone made it clear. This wasn't small. This was seismic. The judge continued, "Your conduct, Mr. Combs, does not reflect confusion or accidental possession. It reflects intent, deliberate concealment, a conscious decision to violate federal rules." A ripple of shock moved through the gallery. Even some reporters shook their heads, stunned at how sharply the judge was speaking. Mark rose one more time, unable to stay silent. "Your Honor, with respect, my client's emotional and mental state has been strained due to the trial, the sentencing, the transition to federal custody, and his public exposure. We ask the court to consider the psychological toll he has been under." The judge didn't blink. "Psychological toll does not justify smuggling alcohol into a federal prison." Mark tried again. "But, Your Honor, this is a man adjusting to incarceration." "Mr. Agnifilo," the judge said, this time with steel behind his voice, "your client's adjustment period is not the subject of this hearing. His violation is." Mark slowly sank back into his seat, defeated, eyes lowered. Diddy's lips parted as if he wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Whatever strength he had left was slipping through his fingers like sand. The judge continued, voice steady as stone. "You were given clear instructions. You were given a clear warning. You were told the consequences." He paused, staring at Diddy in a way that made the entire room hold its breath. "And you chose to ignore them." Diddy whimpered softly, shaking his head, tears falling in rapid drops onto the table. He opened his mouth, a broken, desperate plea forming, but the judge didn't let him speak. "Do not interrupt me." That single sentence struck the room like a hammer. Diddy lowered his head instantly, shoulders collapsing inward, the chains around his wrists clattering softly. He was falling apart, unraveling, breaking. The judge took a breath, slow, deliberate, heavy. The kind of breath someone takes before delivering something irreversible. "This court has determined," he said, "that your original 50-month sentence is no longer appropriate." Gasps burst across the room. Diddy jerked upright, panic flooding his face. No, please, Your Honor. Please. Please. Don't," his voice cracked, collapsing into uncontrollable sobs. The marshal took a step forward, anticipating a breakdown. Mark reached across the table, whispering fiercely, "Shawn, no, stop. Please, stop." But Diddy wasn't listening. He couldn't. His world was imploding second by second. The judge maintained his composure, eyes steady and unwavering. Your prior sentence is hereby vacated. The entire courtroom erupted gasps, whispers, frantic scribbling of pens. The media section jolted upright, phones flying in the air, messages firing off instantly. This wasn't just news. This was history unfolding in real time. Diddy's jaw dropped. His breathing shattered. His chest heaved like he couldn't take in enough air. He shook violently, sobbing as he clutched the edge of the table, trying and failing to steady himself. Your Honor, please, I can fix this. Please, please, don't take my freedom, please. The judge spoke over him with chilling certainty. This court, he said, must now impose a sentence commensurate with the severity of your violation. Diddy let out a sound, half gasp, half scream. The kind of sound only a person who realizes their life is slipping away makes. Cassie covered her mouth in the back row, eyes filling with tears. She didn't smile. She didn't look vindicated. She looked heartbroken. Mark stood again, voice cracking. Your Honor, this is extreme. This man has a family. This man has obligations. This man. The judge cut him off. Sit down. Mark froze and obeyed, eyes dark and defeated. The judge closed the violation report one final time. The thud echoed like a coffin lid closing. Mr. Combs, he said, your actions demonstrate a complete inability to comply with the fundamental expectations of federal custody. Your behavior threatens institutional order, and it shows this court that you cannot be rehabilitated under your prior sentence. Diddy stared at him through blurred eyes, shaking uncontrollably. Please, I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to. Please, please. You had your chance, the judge said quietly, and you threw it away. The silence afterward was suffocating. Then the judge leaned back slightly, straightened his robe, and spoke the words that would haunt Diddy forever. This court is prepared to deliver its sentence. Diddy's entire body jerked. His breathing stopped. His eyes widened, terrified. He whispered, no, please, no, please. But the judge kept going. Mr. Combs, he said, based on the evidence presented, the violation committed, and the danger you pose to the integrity of federal sentencing, this court imposes the maximum penalty. Diddy's world shattered. His sobs turned into screams, raw, painful, desperate. Please, no, Your Honor. Please, please don't do this. I have children. Please, please, please. I can change, please. The marshal grabbed him as he attempted to stand, shaking violently, tears pouring down his face. The judge's eyes stayed cold. Mr. Combs, he said, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment. The courtroom exploded shouts from reporters, gasps from spectators, the sound of chairs scraping, cameras firing in rapid bursts. It was chaos, but Diddy didn't hear any of it. He collapsed forward, screaming, sobbing, choking on his own tears. No, no, please, please, Your Honor. Please don't take my life, please. I'm sorry, please. He shook uncontrollably as marshals pulled him upright, his body limp, unsteady, broken. The chains around his wrists rattled violently with every sob. His knees buckled. He begged, screamed, begged again, voice cracking beyond recognition. Cassie cried silently in the back row. Mark's head dropped into his hands. The judge stood. The courtroom rose. But Diddy stayed broken, folded over, sobbing into the floor as two marshals dragged him back. His screams echoed through the doorway. Please, please, please don't do this. I didn't mean to. Please, please. The judge spoke the final words of the hearing. This court is adjourned. The gavel struck. Diddy's fate was sealed. The gavel strike still echoed through courtroom 12B when the marshals tightened their grip on Diddy's arms, trying to pull him upright. But he wasn't standing. He wasn't even trying to. His legs had turned into something useless, shaking violently, refusing to obey him, refusing to hold the weight of a man whose entire world had just been ripped apart in front of millions. His screams had turned into raw, broken sobs, each one cracking louder than the last. The judge had already stepped away from the bench. His robe moved like a dark shadow as he disappeared through the rear door. He didn't look back. He didn't hesitate. He didn't soften. Because this wasn't the kind of decision a judge reconsiders. It wasn't the kind of ruling he repeats to himself later in questions. It was final. A full stop at the end of a chapter that could never be rewritten. And Diddy felt it. Every ounce of it. His future ending one breath at a time. He clawed at the air as if reaching for something, anything, that could pull him out of this moment. His voice cracked into a high, desperate cry. Please, please, Your Honor. Please don't take my life. Please, I'm begging. But the judge was gone. The doors had already closed behind him. What remained was the collapse. The marshals hauled him up, but his knees buckled again, slamming into the floor with a sickening thud that made people in the gallery gasp. His chains clattered loudly, dragging against the polished marble. His screams echoed off the walls, louder than the clicking cameras, louder than the commotion, louder than the whispers racing through the courtroom. Mark Agnifilo rushed toward him, but was blocked by a marshal. He reached forward anyway, voice cracking with frustration and heartbreak. Shawn, breathe, please breathe. Don't fight, don't make this worse. But Diddy didn't hear him. He didn't hear anything. He could only feel his world slipping away, the reality sinking in like a slow-burning poison. He would die in prison, not in 50 months, not in 10 years, not in 20, but as an old man behind bars, forgotten by the world he once controlled. His sobs softened for a moment, not because the pain eased, but because his voice was giving out. He choked on his breath, gasping, the muscles in his face twisting as if trying to physically push the moment away. Cassie rose from her seat. The entire room noticed. She moved slowly, almost reluctantly, stepping into the aisle with a look that wasn't anger, wasn't triumph, wasn't relief. It was something else, something unbearably heavy. She looked at Diddy not as an accuser, not as a critic, but as someone who had known him once, really known him, and was seeing him break into pieces she never imagined. Her eyes filled with tears she tried and failed to contain. And Diddy saw her. Even through the blur of tears, even through the violent shaking, even through the shock, he saw her. And the look on his face changed, not calmer, not softer, but shattered in a different way. He wasn't seeing a witness or a symbol or a memory of the trial. He was seeing the one face he prayed wouldn't be here to watch this. He mouthed something. His voice couldn't form it, but Cassie understood. It was her name. The marshals pulled him up again. He let out another scream, not from anger, but from the sheer terror of realizing the hearing was over, and this wasn't a nightmare. The sentence wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was real. Life. Life in federal custody. Life as inmate number, not a name. The marshals secured his arms tighter and forced him toward the rear exit. His steps dragged across the floor as if the earth itself was resisting. The cameras flashed nonstop. Reporters shouted, "Diddy, do you have any statement? Is this unfair? Do you regret violating custody rules? Shawn, did you think this would happen?" Every question hit him like a blow he couldn't block. The chains rattled with every trembling movement. His breath escaped in broken gasps. His shoulders shook violently. He tried to turn back, to look at the courtroom one last time, but the marshals kept him moving. His cries echoed through the hallway like someone being dragged into a void. Cassie covered her face with her hands. Members of the gallery wiped tears they didn't expect. Sketch artists froze, pencils shaking. Even prosecutors who had pushed for the maximum penalty avoided eye contact. This wasn't victory. This wasn't justice they were proud of. This was tragedy. Diddy was pulled through the rear door and down the hallway, his body collapsing again and again, forcing the marshals to lift him under the arms like a child who couldn't walk. News cameras caught glimpses through the glass pane, shaky blurred images of a man whose fame had turned into a spotlight he could never escape. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted the moment the rear transport doors opened. Reporters surged forward. Microphones flew toward him. "He got life. It's official. This is unprecedented. Shawn, can you speak to us?" But Diddy didn't respond. He wasn't present anymore. His mind was somewhere between disbelief and collapse, trapped in the shockwave of a sentence too heavy for his body to process. The marshals finally got him inside the transport van. He crumpled onto the bench, face in his hands, sobbing so violently the chains around his wrists shook like they were vibrating. The doors slammed shut. The world outside erupted in chaos. Breaking news banners flashed across every screen. Diddy sentenced to life in prison. Immediate custody ordered. Emergency weekend court hearing ends in historic ruling. Fort Dix alcohol incident leads to maximum penalty. But inside the van there was no chaos. Only one man breaking in real time. He pressed his hands against his face and cried until his voice collapsed entirely. He whispered through shaking lips, I didn't think it would be this. I didn't think, oh God, please, please. But there was no one there to answer him. No one there to soften the blow. No one there to undo the sentence. His fists tightened around the chains until the metal dug into his skin. Everything he built, everything he owned, everything he was, gone because of one bottle, one night, one decision. Back in the courtroom, Cassie stood frozen, staring at the empty space where Diddy had once been. The wooden bench in front of her seemed to echo with the sound of his sobs long after he left. She whispered under her breath, almost to herself. It didn't have to end like this, but it had. The courtroom emptied slowly. Judge Subramanian's ruling spread across the city like wildfire. And inside a transport van, speeding toward a federal holding facility, Shawn Diddy Combs began the first minutes of a life sentence he never imagined. If you're still here, comment below. Do you think the judge went too far? Or did Diddy cross a line he could never come back from? And before you go, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because this story is far from over, and we'll bring you every breaking update as it happens.